Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Stag. I'm super pumped to be sitting with Brian Sanders, the director of a film that's going to be coming out soon, hopefully, Food Lies. Brian, what did you do on the weekend, mate?
Yeah, actually this weekend I went to Palm Springs, so I'm here in Los Angeles. So it's a kind of like a 2.5 hour drive, and there's a birthday party out there, so I hung out for the weekend.
Nice. What do you do in Palm Springs for a birthday party?
Well, they rented this big house with a pool, and you just barbecue and go in the pool, and it's nice and hot out there, so it was great.
Sounds awesome, man. We talked about this via email, and you kind of double checked what I meant by this question. Who is Brian Sanders today?
Yeah, well, really, I was searching for that my whole life. I started as a mechanical engineer, and I started in film actually growing up. Then I started as a mechanical engineer in college. Then I got into tech, and I was always trying to figure out what am I interested in? What is my deal? And trying different things out. And I actually finally figured it out with this whole film stuff and this nutrition stuff. So really, I'm just all about just spreading this health information and living this healthy life and providing content for people to do the same. So really that's the whole focus of my life. I wake up thinking about it. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, little ideas for the movie or a graphic I can do in the film, or, some kind of new message that I could send out over social media or whatever. So yeah, it consumes me for the past year. It's all I think about. So I guess that's me.
Awesome, man. There's the point of what resonates with me, because when I go to sleep thinking about different things and wake up thinking about different things and go to the gym thinking about different things. So there's the resonance. You said you've come full circle back to filmmaking. How did you sort of maintain your creativity? And now, of course, you're making films, you're making a podcast. And what other creative outlets do you have that keep that creativity alive?
Well, yeah, I've always had side projects, and my whole life is just building things, and that's why I went into engineering or creating things. Or I took a break for a while because I had so many computer injuries from working on the overuse injuries, and I couldn't work. And then I started doing art, and I sold some paintings around LA, and I was in an art show, and I don't know. I guess it's my parents' health. My dad was very artistic, and my mom was very mathematic, and I just kind of cultivated that my whole life. So just always use your spare time wisely, I guess. Just creating something.
Absolutely. We've got similar upbringings, except mine's the reverse. My dad's a physicist, come engineer, and my mum, she was also a sciencey. She was a lab technician, but she is also very arty. So, yeah, nice. Food Lies, mate. You've sort of got the title that much of what you've been told about food is wrong. That's probably pretty much of a letdown for most people. You also go further to say that the past 50 years with the science has been a bit wishy-washy. What's your take on that as a summary?
Well, yeah, it's funny because in 2018, we're finding that almost everything's opposite of what we've been told. It's seriously on every single account. Some people can't believe it, that it's so opposite, even down to salt, right? That everyone's saying salt is bad their whole life. And I mean, there's no evidence that that's bad. It's bad for middle-aged men who already have hypertension. They did the studies they did were, on that. And then they recommended that for the whole United States, and then, trickles to the world. Then, fiber. We thought we needed fiber. I've heard different stories about, we studied some African populations and they ate a lot of fiber and they're healthy. So we just said everyone has to eat fiber. And well, there's no evidence for that. And there's thousands of people showing that you need zero fiber, all the carnivores. So even those small things, but of course the big ones are cholesterol. Eating cholesterol is somehow bad for your health, or gives you heart disease. That's totally bogus. Saturated fat is bad for you is obviously bogus. Meat is bad. That's my biggest one. I just hate the vegan agenda, just pushing it out there. I mean, I get they have these moral views, but they're they're hurting people's nutrition by spreading their propaganda. So that whole meat is bad is obviously so stupid, because humans have been eating meat for millions of years. And the environmental stuff is something I do address in the film as well, because they do have some points there, so we have to figure that out. And we actually have been figuring it out. And the more I research it, the more I realize that the way we're doing meat production in the US is actually really efficient. And it's actually not that bad. I mean, vegans will love to, show you some video of some, the worst case scenario where some cows are like jammed together. And really, that's not even how it is. Like that's probably when they were just feeding them. Like when they feed them, then they all group together and then they snap a photo of the worst, where it looks like they're the most condensed. They actually have a lot of room to walk around. They actually have vets on premises at all times in these feedlots. They're getting a well-formulated diet by PhDs. Like, it's in the best interest of the farmer to keep these cows happy, right? They're trying to make a good product. And so there's just tons of myths around that. And I think that most of the food lies really are around meat. And I mean, really, saturated fat. I mean, that's because it's in meat. I think it all started about 150 years ago, where we started demonizing meat. I don't know if you've gotten into that story at all.
Yeah, I was about to say that Seventh-day Adventist,
Yeah,
meat gives you cancer, it'll kill you. It's not great.
yeah, the Gary Fettke, right?
Yeah,
He's over by you.
yeah. It's and
He talks about it a lot.
and especially for Australia, or like Seventh-day Adventists setting up dietitians associations in the States and all that sort of stuff. But then when it comes to Australia, they sort of, and New Zealand, they sort of came to these countries, set up printing presses, set up universities, set up schools, set up the dietitians associations, and basically created a way to channel a marketing system for Kellogg's and Sanitarium. And I thought New Zealand was reasonably bad. Our All Blacks are sponsored pushing Weet-Bix, and I suppose it's the same in the States with different cereal brands. But then they come to Australia, and the dogma around grains and fat and all that sort of stuff is just remarkable.
Yeah, it's sad. And then they own so much of the media here in the US as well, that all the printing presses and radio stations and TV stations, so many of them are Seventh-day Adventist and just pushing that message still.
Yeah, one of the things that amazed me, I heard Joe Rogan talking to Kevin, can't remember his last name. He's a comedian, and he was saying about how he had a heart attack, and then he got raced to a hospital.
Kevin Smith.
That's the
Kevin
one.
Smith. Yeah.
And he was like, I got raced to a hospital, and I got a stent put in, and I was like, oh bugger, that's not really been shown to be that good anymore. And then I changed my diet to be vegan, and then he was talking a bit more about veganism, and I was with the best cardiologist in the world, and then he said the buzzword. It was like, it was the Adventist Hospital. And I was like, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, I listened to a podcast with him, and my goal is to get him on a podcast one day and sort of tell him what's real. And that, I mean, I kind of understand why a vegan diet works. It's not, it's not ideal, and it's not, but I know why it works, right? It kind of fits into this like unifying theory of nutrition, which I've been trying to talk about, and we'll talk about in the film. But it's almost like a hack state. It's like humans evolved when our environment failed us and we couldn't get a hunt, whether it was because of the weather or the whole climate in general, or the geography of where we lived, and we couldn't get an animal, then we had to rely on plants and, some potatoes or tubers, stuff like that. And we did that temporarily. And so our bodies evolved to handle that temporarily, but that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And so these vegans, he spent this whole podcast talking about how amazing this vegan diet was. And it's like, well, that's just a hack state. That's not ideal. We need animal products for proper nutrition, much more bioavailable, all the stuff that you guys know. So.
Yeah. And you say about how the image of feedlot is when they're feeding. And actually, if you look at it the reason why they've got their head poked through something and eating out of a trough is so that, one, they're all separated so they don't beat each other up. Two, so that they don't soil the food that they're eating. And three, so it's easier to clean up the waste. And then, like you say, they then go off to a big space that's all interactive and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all. I mean, the problem maybe when they go to slaughter, and maybe if they see, the next animal in front of them getting killed, but they figured that out too. They have like curved tunnels where they can't see the next animal, or there's ways to do this where it's very humane. And I don't know what else the alternative would be. They're just going to die somehow. I mean, they're
yeah, the argument of go watch an animal die in the wild is, yeah, then see how your heartstrings go is pretty high. You also said about the information coming out in those videos, and you've talked to Joel Stellarton and Peter Ballestead, and I've sort of just come across those guys too, and just through Sean Baker, and the best piece of information I saw they put up the other day was the 40% greenhouse gases from cattle, which is absolute rubbish. In the US, it's more like 2%. And
yeah,
and I know in New Zealand, in Australia, they're pushing for pushing big to get reductions in one of their biggest industries, based on these bogus numbers. What else is there sort of out there?
Oh, yeah. Well, those numbers, that's so funny because those numbers were retracted. So it came out, the livestock's long shadow was a report that the FAO put together. And the scientists, I have the article saved somewhere. It's from a UK newspaper, but they publicly retracted that statement that there was somehow more greenhouse gases than transportation industry, when they admitted that they took every single input possible from animal production, and then all they took was tailpipe emissions for transportation. So it's absurd. And so it's actually the opposite, right? I mean, transportation obviously is way more if you count all the everything. So that was a big one to me, which is funny because a whole movie was made. This Cowspiracy movie was made based on that one study that was retracted. And so I think it's so funny. It's like, okay, that this movie is meaningless now.
Yeah.
And these are the same guys that came on to make What the Health.
And that was an absolute disaster. What the health? And yeah, like go live in a city in your greenhouse emissions, and then go look at a paddock of animals. It just makes you scratch your head all the time.
It's funny. Well, What the Health? I mean, that's why I started making this film. So once I saw that, I realized something needs to be done.
Yeah. Do you think you're part of the kickback for those films? Like The Magic Pill came out this year, and we've been lucky to speak to Pete Evans, and then Vinnie Tortorich is also bringing out Fat as well. Do you think you've been all motivated by the same thing?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know, because I didn't know Magic Pill was in production, and yeah. And then I think Vinny and I were on the same page around the same time. I actually almost made Food Lies with Vinny. Right. I met with him. Yeah, I met with him last year, and we had a few meetings, and then we kind of I think it was too many cooks in the kitchen, right? We were the two guys, and we had our own ideas. So we kind of just each found our own team and made it separately.
No, I think it's a good thing.
There's more films out there, like we'll take different angles on it. And yeah, I think it's good. And I mean, there's actually a couple more, really, I think. That bigger, faster, stronger guy, or the Mark Bell.
Yeah, Mark Bell.
Yeah. I heard him talking about a film.
Yeah, I think that's another one that Sean Baker's going to be in. Do you think, going back to like the stats and the science and the headlines, that's part of the problem with our food and why there are so many lines, is because studies get so sensationalized, the statistics around them is sort of, I don't know, made to look better than it is, and then a lot of the time statements then get retracted, but it's too late because it's out there. Like you said about the heart healthy grains, that's just something that keeps getting said. Do you think that part of it, what our problem is?
Yeah, and it's just as biased. Everyone just thinks that a vegetable based diet is healthier. It's like that's the most ingrained thing, that meat is bad and vegetables are good. And I think maybe the biggest push for that was in the 70s, like the late 60s and 70s in the US, like the whole hippie movement. I don't know if you guys got that over in Australia or wherever, but just this hippie movement where everyone's about green and peace and love, and that equated to not eating animals, and the best way to feed the world was with plants. And I think that's totally not true. And it all stemmed from there, really. It was, I think it's like everyone's sentiment is that's what we need to do. And in the media especially, right, there's all these people in the media and even in the scientific community where they're trying to prove this, right? It's like it's this obvious bias where good scientists are just trying to disprove their theories or just figure things out. And then there's a certain sect of scientists, especially like in the Harvard School of Public Health, where a lot of these studies come out of, and these are the people that are trying to say that low carb dieting decreases longevity, or that coconut oil is bad. I mean, these are the people that have this bias that's so obvious, and they are publicly vegetarian or vegan, and they're still allowed to spread this bias. And so yeah, it's everywhere. I don't know what to do about it other than if you slowly get the information out, then everything won't be skewed towards that angle.
Yeah, and some of those people at Harvard School of Health are also sponsored by massive pasta companies. So.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I don't know how people can't figure that out. It's like, wait.
So you said about cholesterol clogs arteries, and I saw someone it might have even been yesterday, again debating, is an egg healthy for you? And I was like, I think that the caption was, are we still talking about this? And fat makes you fat. So I had a body impedance scan done on Saturday, and I've actually dropped 2% from 12% down to 10%, and I eat somewhere between keto and paleo, plenty of fat. I'm one of those people that most people would look at weirdly if they saw me make breakfast and pour the bacon fat on to top of my eggs, and there's no toast on my plate. And then, of course, Sean Baker released his calcium scan.
Yeah.
A big fat zero. It's clearly true. What other examples of these claims and dogmas? What other examples do you have for the alternative, apart from the fact that it's come out in the British Medical Journal and cardiologists like Aseem Malhotra are saying this is absolutely bogus?
Yeah, well, for one, I'm gonna get that in the film. So yeah, I filmed with Sean Baker a long time ago, but now that this calcium score came out, I'm gonna add that to the film, or see if I can get a copy of, if he could send me a video of it or something. So that will be great. But I think there's great stuff going on with like Nina Teicholz, and actually I think she posted one of those articles in the BMJ about it. But she's her nutrition coalition is working to fight the guidelines, and she's compiled, or her group has compiled a lot of studies. So I know I have a spreadsheet of almost 100 studies now showing this, superiority of a high fat diet compared to low fat, and the efficacy of it, and there's no, negative effects. So yeah, it's almost 100 studies by now. So it's just so funny that the other side is just trying to ignore them. Or especially when the Verta study came out, that they're curing type 2 diabetes, right? In 60% of patients. I love this. Someone was talking about, it's like, why is this not the biggest news ever? Why is this not every, news outlet and every scientist talking about it in the country? Being like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? Instead, it's only us talking about it on podcasts, with like a small, percentage of the world who cares about it. So the science is there. There's the volume of studies is there. It's just documentaries. A lot of people think that that's the best way to do it. And I agree. That's why I'm making it, right? It's like, that's the best way to get the word out there, because, it's like a nice 90-minute presentation of a thesis of everything you can, all the visuals, graphics, animation, studies, everything put together. And yeah, I mean, it's consumable by an average person, right? Because the average person's not going to read those 100 studies in my Excel sheet. So that's why I'm doing this.
Nice. You say about 100 studies and the science behind it. When Nina went and talked in defence of Professor Tim Noakes, I think she took with her those 100 studies and stumped the prosecution, and they had no questions for her, just because she's like, "This is the facts here, mate." And I don't know what you guys are prosecuting Tim Noakes for, but
didn't they just not say anything? They were just like, well, we're screwed. We got nothing.
This was a waste of $4 million.
Yeah.
No, and then you said my favorite thing, Verna Health, like you say, you read it and go, wow, holy cow, this is so effective. And I'm another big fan of Jason Fung as well. And I get all these, I'm an optometrist, I get all these patients coming in and they're on the insulin and their life's a misery. And I go, have you heard about this? And they're just like, oh my God, I want to do that. And, that's coming up to 3 years now. And one of the arguments people say, oh, ketogenic diets aren't sustainable. Well, here's 3 years of people doing it, and they're doing it because they love it, and they do it because they're getting the greatest results. And even myself, this week, we've sort of been eating on a budget, and when you eat on a budget, you get a bit more carbs. And already I'm like, oh man, it's been 3 days of these meals. I don't feel great. And before we came to Australia, we were staying at my girlfriend's parents' place, and it was one of these sort of food preparation boxes. And again, it was, Nina talks about the guidelines infiltrate everywhere. And again, these healthy meals were food guidelines and carb centric. And you get 2 hours later and you're like, oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
One of the big things is something you talk about in the movie is that weight loss isn't about being in the gym and being active and calories in and calorie out. Most of it comes down to diet. And the biggest thing about that Verta Health shows is that the first 60 days where people aren't changing much of their lifestyle is when they get these massive results. What else have you got around that, man?
Yeah, and that's almost like the underlying theme of the movie is that, well, yeah, it's all about the diet. And I hate the eat less, move more thing. I wanted to start popularizing eat densely, move intensely.
Yeah,
That's what it's about, right? It's eat nutrient dense foods and move intensely. Like, you don't need to do a ton of cardio, right? You don't need to do all this stuff. Like, I like Dr. Ted Naiman. If you're familiar with him, he does these workouts. They're like 15 minutes. He's like, just do a bunch of pull-ups and push-ups, like that's all you need. And so I started doing stuff like that, and I had great results. And just, yeah, I think really it's about nutrient dense foods. And I'm going into a lot of that in the film. I really like the Weston A. Price stuff. I, got through the Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which was kind of a long read, but, really interesting. I realized that all this modern movement of paleo and stuff, not all of it, but so much of it is based on his work. Kind of people, like, if once you read it, then you start listening to all these messages out there, including my messages, and it's all kind of, a lot of people just come back to the stuff that he talked about, in the 1930s and what he found with all these populations that were so healthy. And he talks about nutrient density, and he doesn't talk about a lot of exercise. It's not like he's like, yeah, these people are active, they're moving around, but they're not healthy just, because of that. They're healthy because they're eating the most nutrient dense foods possible. And they're doing it instinctively, right? They didn't have science, right? These are like isolated hunter-gatherer populations all over the world. And they knew by trial and error and just looking at their offspring, and they figured out what's the healthiest way to live and eat. And I think it was so interesting that he went to, the top of the Swiss Alps, to Melanesia, to like Australia, to Africa. And they all had these similar traditions and cultures around even before birth, before even being married. They would give the women a certain diet, right, to lead them up to pregnancy, of this highly nutrient dense animal foods. and like liver or seafood and all this stuff like that. And they knew that that's how healthy children were made. So yeah, I'm going into a lot of the history of this stuff too, or evolution stuff to modern hunter-gatherers in the past 100 years, and then modern science. So hitting it from all angles.
Nice. And one of the books we've got for creating nutritious baby food for our baby, she's nearly 7 months old. Yeah, it mentions Western A. Price, and we gave her this liver drink the other day, which was basically liver blended in broth, and it tasted like a liquid meat pie, and she loved it. She joked like
oh, wow.
Taking it down.
I'm actually cooking some liver right now. I'm trying to sous vide it. If you sous vide the liver, cook it slowly, and then I'm going to try to chop it up finely and then mix it in with some ground beef.
Nice.
Yeah.
Goes well with bacon and onions too.
Yeah, I got some finely chopped onions going in there too.
Lovely. And you've got guys like Mark Scissors and Rob Wolf in the film. You talk back to sharing the same message, ancestral health. What else about our ancestors do you think is key? This sapien diet you talk about on your website.
Yeah. Well, so I got Sis, and actually Rob Wolf, I think he's one of the guys helping someone else out make a film. So he's one of the only guys I didn't get in it. I love his message though. Like I read his book recently, and it's great. But I mean, I think everything comes down to ancestral living, right? Our ancestors tell us everything. It's not like, I think it's so stupid when they say, oh yeah, like we're supposed to like live exactly like them, or just because they did this one thing, that means we have to do it. I'm like, no, not at all, right? We need to fit it into our modern society. It's like, obviously we work in a job in an office or something like that. Like we're not going to go hunt an animal with a spear. Like when you try to attack the arguments that way, I think it's so stupid. All I'm saying, and what the whole sapien diet or a lot of the film is about, is how do we look at what we know about them and apply it to our lives. And so I think the main thing is, I guess, nutrient density. Well, it's just, how do I feed myself? How do I get the highest quality foods with the least amount of filler? Right. And then that's how I stay healthy. So that really is a lot of animal foods. And that has the most bioavailability to them. And that's what I've been finding a lot in research. I don't want to be anti-plant foods, but it kind of seems to be that there's not that much to them really. When you really look at it, that the nutrients that they supposedly have, they don't get to you. Right? They have have you seen those studies? They're showing like the bioavailability, like if you're eating, Dr. Georgia Ede talks about this one, where you're eating oysters and they have a lot of zinc in them. But then if you eat those oysters with spinach, you get less of that zinc. They can measure. And then if you eat that with with, I think it's beans and corn tortillas, you get zero. Zero of that zinc actually comes through. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. Maybe I need to rethink this stuff, because I don't want to get, conspiracy theory. Like some people are like, in the carnivore community, they're so like anti plants that they're trying to say no one can ever eat a plant ever, which is kind of ridiculous. But it's just, you got to rethink the plants. And going back to the ancestors, I think it makes sense if you do little thought experiments. Like if you were a caveman and you went out and looked around at what there is to eat, what would you think was food? Like if you looked at like a wheat field, would you think that was food? No, you'd just be like, well, I don't even know what that is. Or, a lot of these plants, you'd be like, I would get sick if I ate those leaves. But what they thought was food was animals, and then I guess like fruits. Right. So I guess that's the whole paleo principle, right? It's just like eat animals and fruits and, tuber, like potatoes. I guess even potatoes, you have to cook to get the nutrients out of them. If you eat them raw, they're pretty harmful. I think kind of poisonous, but yeah. So yeah, that's what I think about I guess are looking to our ancestors and what to eat.
And that's probably the problem with a lot of the people argue, oh, well, our ancestors' life expectancy was so average. And, well, they were in a very different environment.
Well, yeah, and I think that stuff is skewed too because I mean, really, they found evidence that these people lived to their 80s if they live past childhood. Like a lot of them died between 0 and 5, so that brought down the average. So I don't think there's and then they died of different things. Obviously, they died of infectious diseases, right? That we now have figured out. But if they didn't die of an accident or an infectious disease, then I've seen a lot of evidence that they lived into their 80s. And we've seen that too in modern hunter-gatherers that live without modern medicine and live exactly the same. And they do live very long.
Yeah, and like Sean says, I think in your snippet that, it's been shown that they were heavily carnivorous. They'd eat a mammoth. There's why there's no mammoths.
That's it. Yeah, and that's probably for the longest amount of human history was just eating mammoths, like millions of years. There's that we just ate fatty meat, and that was about it. And yeah, I had a great talk with a professor who studies all this stuff, who's like really deep into it, Dr. Bill Schindler. He went to study with modern hunter-gatherers around the world for the past year and really learned a lot about them. And he's talking about the way there's no such thing as a balanced diet. Like what you ate is you got an animal and you ate that entire animal until it's done. And then you got a new animal. Like that's how you eat. It's you eat nose to tail, you eat all the parts of it and you eat it until it's gone and then you start again. So
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to realize is carbs are sugar, and you've got people like Dom D'Agostino and Jeff Volek saying, look at what carbs do, and even back to Australia being so grain and carb centric. University of South Australia, which is away from what they call the sort of sponsored University of Sydney, they put continuous glucose meters on normal people. And again, the biggest spike in their blood sugar was from cornflakes. Could you elaborate a bit more on how is it that grains and fruit may just be to our bodies sugar?
Well,
and also, so why that might make us fat if we're having too much of this?
Yeah, I mean, it really all comes down to the insulin. I think that's the biggest thing that people should talk about. Talk to Professor Noakes about this, and it was great in the film. We got some great lines from him. It's like hyperinsulinemia, like this problems with insulin and blood sugar is the root of all disease. It's the root of all the problems, right? That is where everything goes wrong. Okay, and then what makes that insulin rise and that blood sugar rise? Well, high glycemic foods like things, especially the more refined they are, the worse. So that's sugar and flour, like these highly refined modern things. And that's the same thing that Weston A. Price talked about. This is when all the problems happened, when he saw these modern hunter-gatherers living perfectly healthy lives, and then flour and sugar came in and things went wrong. So the more refined it is, and I actually started looking at some studies, some interesting stuff going on, where they can just show that the actual refinement is the problem, where they look at like rodent models and say, okay, we have the same diet, but we ground this one up more. And these group of rodents got fatter just by that act of processing it more. So when you're looking at your insulin and blood sugar, you have to think the more refined it is, the worse it is for you. And then with fruits, these fruits are very different than the fruits we used to have, right? So that we've bred them for thousands of years. It's not just GMO, like, I don't know, it's not some like genetically modified thing. It's not some conspiracy theory there either. It's just we selected them to be juicy and sugary. So a lot of these fruits are not normal. This is not what we're used to. We're not used to having these huge surges of sugar from a fruit. So and then there's the debate, like, the lower glycemic index stuff that doesn't raise your blood sugar as high, right? There won't be that huge spike, but it'll have a bigger glycemic load for longer. That supposedly that's better. So yeah, I guess so. But I'd say just don't eat any of those carbs so you don't raise your blood sugar at all, or as little as possible. So I guess the sapien diet type of thing I'm trying to promote is how can you have the least amount of blood sugar rise or and therefore insulin for your whole life, right? And so then there's two ways to do that is don't eat foods that cause blood sugar spikes, which is basically all carbs, fat and protein have to a much lesser degree, and then don't eat as often, right? So that's intermittent fasting is really big these days, or condensed eating windows, and I think that's great. It's fantastic, and it works. I mean, it is awesome. So, and why it works is one, you're giving your body a lot of time to not eat food, right? So you're getting all that repair and good stuff going on when your body doesn't have to process food, but you're also not giving your body tons of insulin spikes all day, right? Because you're only eating it's like the fewer times you eat, the better almost. And then also there's another side benefit is that the fewer times you eat, the less opportunity you have to overeat, right? If you naturally eat to satiety, right? If you sit down, you're going to eat, it's not like you're going to take like 2 bites and leave, right? You're naturally going to eat until you're somewhat full. Some people have better self-control than others. I don't. So I eat 2 giant meals because I know once I start eating, I'm going to eat a lot. But if you're eating twice, then you have less opportunity to overeat, right? And then if you eat 4 times, then you're eating 4 times until you get full. That's naturally going to be more calories. And at the end of the day, calories do matter, right? Like it's definitely calories in, calories out is sort of a meaningless statement. It's like, how are you getting fat? The question is like, why are you eating too many calories, right? That's like Gary Taubes has, a great book about that. And a lot of people talk about that. Jason Fung, I saw a great presentation that he did about that too. Why? That's the real question. Why are you eating too much? And a lot of that is because the insulin and the blood sugar, right? You raise your blood sugar and then it actually dips back down 2 to 3 hours later. And so I saw a recent study that showed that lined up exactly with the self-reported satiety. So you have this dip in blood sugar a couple hours later. So you're hypoglycemic and then you're hungry again. And that's like when your ghrelin hormone kicks in and you're hungry. And then self-reported at, exactly this 3-hour mark, all the participants who ate the high carb meal said they were hungry. So yeah, basically, I guess that's all. All I'm saying is eat less times, eat in a more condensed window, and eat foods that don't raise your blood sugar. That's all you need to do in life.
Yeah, and I take great motivation from the work of Dr. Bernstein and the Type 1 crew, and they work on the idea of small numbers, small carbs in, small insulin dosing, small margin for error. And, that they sort of term that as an artificial pancreas. We've got a real pancreas, and it works pretty similar. The amount of carbohydrate in is the amount of insulin your pancreas produces versus where your blood sugar goes. Does it go up and down and, oh, now I'm hungry again, I want to go up again? Or does it go sort of, oh, yeah, I've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
I've got to deal with that.
You just want that smooth curve. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and, Jason Fung and Dave Feldman, who talks about cholesterol as well, another dude hacking cholesterol. Let's talk about this freezer model. And if you've got this massive dose of insulin, well, then your freezer's locked. You're never going to be able to access your fat stores because insulin's a storage hormone. And it just blows your mind every time that I see it in practice. These people on doses of insulin, they go, oh, I get my blood sugar down to 6.5 and I feel terrible. And it's like, well, you've already got so much insulin, you're chucking more in there. Your body goes, no, I'm trying to store stuff. I'm not letting you use that for energy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so great when I got to the point of understanding these analogies or these models. So you have a mental model in your head of what's going on, and then you really figure things out. And I think if everyone in the world kind of got these mental models in their head with nutrition, I think everyone would be a lot healthier, right? The problem is it's kind of complicated, or it takes a while to figure them out, or you need, you or I watch tons of lectures or stuff like that. So we finally, really get it. But if the everyday person could get it, I think they'd realize what they're doing to themselves.
Mm. Another mental model you guys have is grass-fed versus grain-fed cows and how they look and how the meat looks. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh yeah, that actually is a debate that I'm not gonna say that I figured out. I don't think anyone has like figured this out exactly, right? There's so many things going on where there's benefits to it, but then there's downsides.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, like I was saying before, how we do the grain fed, I mean, that's only in the last third of their life, right? If they go to the feedlot, all animals spend 2/3, all the ruminants and cows spend 2/3 of their life on pasture. So I don't see a big problem with having some grains, and it's not even all grains, right? They're eating different forage and, like sort of grasses anyway in those feedlots. And some of it is leftover food, right? It's that we don't use. It's a good way to recycle or reuse food scraps, and then some of it is grain, yes, but I don't think it's that big a problem, right? So I go back and forth though, because I do promote, we are touching on the film, the sustainability aspect, and that pasture raised is great and all this stuff, but I think how we do it now is pretty efficient, and I don't think the profile of the meat is that different. Right? People talk about omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in the meat from grass-fed, grain-fed. Well, meat is not a great source of omega-3 anyway. Mm. So, you know what I mean? If you can eat like one spoonful of like sardines and you'll get way more omega-3s than a whole steak. So you shouldn't really care that much about this omega-3, omega-6 ratio. What you should care more about is what you can afford and you want to be healthy. And I mean, I'm on a budget too, right? I'm trying to make a documentary. There's not a lot of money flying around here. So I'm eating ground beef, like I'm not going to get some grass-fed steak every day. It's what's healthy and it's what I can afford. I'm, eating eggs and ground beef and, some other stuff like that. I think that's a great message. And Dr. Eric Westman talks about that a lot, because he has a lot of experience. He does like very low income patients. So he's just been a loud voice in that movement of do what you can afford, like this, even if it's cheap meat that's, came from a feedlot, this is healthier for you than any type of carbohydrate based, packaged food or any other type of thing. And it's actually not that expensive to eat healthy foods without carbs. I mean, I've done experiments where I've eaten, $5.50 a day. Sometimes I average $7 a day. I don't think it's that hard to afford $7 a day, right? And you just eat eggs and sardines. Sardines are great. You eat ground beef, spinach, onions. I mean, you could just eat those like 6 things and be super healthy and super cheap.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, again, a lot of resonance going on there, man.
Yeah.
So what's sort of your health motivation? I find everybody has a health motivation. Mine, I think, comes from my grandpa dying of type 2 diabetes, I think. And maybe in my optometry practice, seeing so many unhealthy people, and then those 80, 90, and even 100-year-old gems come in who are just full of vitality and going, wow, I want to be like that. Mm-hmm. What's your sort of health motivation, and do you have a journey or
oh yeah,
eureka moment or something?
Yeah, kind of a little bit. Yeah. So mine's like kind of 4 years ago. So my parents had a lot of problems. So yeah, I mean, basically I was about 30 and I lost my dad to cancer and my mom Alzheimer's, basically. Yeah. So these are chronic diseases that I didn't even realize how much they were based on your diet. right? And a lot of the science is coming out, and I'm very confident that it's because of diet, right? These are these modern diseases that our ancestors didn't get, and even the modern hunter-gatherers that Weston A. Price started in the 30s didn't get. You know, no one gets these except for in the modern diet. So that was a turning point for me, and I saw my friends kind of getting into this. You know, they're big Mark Sisson fans, and, you know, reading his books and blogs, and then I saw them getting way healthier, and so I kind of tried it, and I kind of was like halfway into it, and it was halfway working. And then, yeah, really a year ago when I went all in with this research and the film, and I went all in with the cutting out, you know, grains and sugar, you know, and vegetable oils for, you know, the 90% of my diet, I saw just amazing transformations. You know, it's my body composition was great. Never have been sick. I mean, I haven't been sick since that happened 4 years ago. And it's just my initial sort of push. So yeah, it's really, yeah, unbelievable how good I feel these days. So I was trying to say, you know, people, all these haters will come at me because I'm on social media and, you know, in the spotlight a little bit. They'll be like, oh, well, what's so bad about grains, or what, you know, you guys are crazy trying to cut out a whole food group. And one of my arguments is, hey, I don't even want to argue with you. If you could feel like what I feel like, and you know what I know, you wouldn't eat these foods either. And I'm not denying that carbs are delicious, right? Like, no, I'm not saying that like a donut or pizza or, you know, all this stuff is delicious. It's that it's that harmful that I'm going to choose to not eat them. That's how harmful they are. So I want to make that point to people, is that, yeah, that they are that bad, and you're also can be equally satisfied eating different foods, right? I don't think you can objectively say which is tastier, like an amazing steak or a cake or a pizza, you know, like really, I don't know, they're equally great in different ways, but they're objectively way different for your body, right? One is objectively terrible and will make you feel bad, probably, right? If you eat like a big steak, you're gonna feel fine. I feel amazing. I feel like I can go work out right after eating. And then if I eat a big piece of cake, I'm gonna feel miserable for like a couple hours, just all that sugar. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think also going this way of eating really, like you say, you feel so good that when you go back, you're like, I did feel that crap.
Yeah, like
It's
this
like,
is my everyday life before.
what was I doing? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty eye opening, I guess, and you're right. You know, people going back to Verda. You know, why are these people now 3 years deep? It's because they feel amazing, and especially for a lot of them that come from being overweight, come from having, you know, high blood sugars, being on insulin, and just feeling rubbish. To now they don't need any of that. Heaps of them are even off everything, and like I said, 60% of them are clinically reversed their type 2 diabetes. That's
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, they try to say it's not sustainable. It's just so funny. It just didn't work for you. You didn't do it correctly. Yeah.
yeah. Which I guess is you know, that's the vegan argument. And how do you think that, you know, both you and I, we avoid our cognitive dissonance, and you know, the with making a film like this, you're just going to get, oh, you're just denying what the vegan thing is, or you're just as bad as what the health, and you know, and
Mhm.
that was the thing about Magic Pill. You know, in Australia they tried to get it pulled off Netflix, which was absolute rubbish. But
Mhm.
you know, what do you sort of say that, you know, you're just as bad
Yeah.
as the propaganda? You're creating, you know,
Yeah.
keto propaganda or paleo propaganda or carnivore
No,
propaganda.
no, that's a great question, because I thought a lot about that, because I've questioned myself that for a while, and then I always try to recalibrate and make sure that I am not just doing that. Right. So I've thought a lot about this, and I'm very confident that I'm not just doing that because it's based on science, for one thing. Right. So I always check myself. and then I think about it and look, and I'm confident that it's all science backed. So that's one thing. And two is I'm not going to just show one side. I think that's the biggest thing. So the magic pill, I also tried to purposely look up criticism of the magic pill, right? I sought out, Reddit forums or something where they were saying, oh yeah, it's just a propaganda piece, but on the opposite side, like you said, or this is just, yeah, they're trying to make these insane claims that you're going to eat like meat for like 10 minutes and cure autism. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to make any bold claims, right? I'm going to kind of just always say, hey, this is what we see in the scientific literature. We've seen, this, this thousands of anecdotes that people have gotten healthy. And then another thing is show both sides of the story. And so why I call it the unifying theory of nutrition is that there are ways to do things that can work on different kinds of diets. And that's why I called it it's at the different metabolic state. It's like if our environment failed us, we had this different way of living. So I'm going to address it, which magic pill didn't do. And what the health doesn't do. They don't address the other side. Like you bring up Sean Baker's perfect calcium score. Vegans are never going to bring that up. They're never going to have an answer to it, right? It goes directly against everything that they believe in. They believe that meat's going to clog your arteries and kill you. He's directly refuting that. And there's many people who have done that as well. So I'm going to say, hey, I understand why different things work, right? You attack it from the angle of, I see both sides. I understand why a vegan diet works. You're giving up like all the processed foods. You're giving up a lot of sugars and all these bad things for you, and you're going very low fat. So you can get away with eating a high carb diet if you're going very low fat and you're eating very clean whole foods, right? That's what vegans are kind of showing. And that's what different populations like in Simone and Bolivia, or, people always bring up the Catawans. Ivor Cummins talks about them, right? They're eating a very heavy starch diet, but very low fat and low protein. So I'm going to talk about that side. And I'm like, I get it. That's just your biological hack that you shouldn't be doing for a long period of time. And you're not disproving my whole theory. Like I'm talking more about a framework that is just the basics of nutrition, which is saying don't eat high fat and high sugar at the same time, right? High fat and high carb at the same time is like deadly combo. And that's what most people do in the world. And that's why there's so many fat and sick people in the world. So the people on the more keto paleo side are just going high fat and low carb, right? They're doing they're avoiding that killer combo of fuel sources. And yeah, the Catawans and the vegans are doing the other version, except their version isn't as good because they're not getting those nutrient dense animal products, right? So vegans are leaving out the most important part of the diet is those nutrient dense animal products. So I'd say if you wanted to do a whole foods plant-based diet with no sugars or grains or vegetable oils, plus low fat, highly nutrient dense animal foods like liver and oysters, then you could be healthy, right? Eat, because the liver and the oysters are low fat and they're giving you the protein and the tons of micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals you need. And then you're getting your fuel from plant-based carbohydrate sources. Okay, that's fine, right? But no one does that because they have this moral objection to it, and they're avoiding the most nutrient dense, the like cornerstone of their diet. So that's kind of the position I'm taking. So I'm showing both sides, and all I'm saying is just eat some animal foods, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and if you believe Sarah Pace on Brit Sher's interview with her, that maybe those vegans are actually eating some wild salmon.
Yeah, I've heard that from many different people actually over the years, that they are getting some good well-sourced fish or something.
Yeah, but we can neither confirm nor deny that.
Yeah.
You say your argument's science based, and even what the health they try to throw data at you, but I think to deeper clarify that it's the strength of the science. It's random controlled trials. It's clinical pathophysiology from models that backs up the science, rather than this massive data plot of food frequency questionnaires of what did you eat last year and how often, and maybe if we look at this data and look at this correlation, well then perhaps it's meat that causes cancer at 1.2 odds ratio, which means nothing.
Yeah.
Versus when you look at smoking and it's like something like 40 odds.
Yeah, it's like up to like 38.
Yeah. Do you think that's also part of the key? Is there's science and then there's stats, or do they say lies and statistics or something like that?
Well, yeah. Well, a problem is epidemiology. That's the biggest problem. Is that nutrition research is really hard. It's almost impossible. So we have to rely on epidemiology, which is the worst thing to rely on. That doesn't show you anything unless it's super obvious and specific, like smoking. That's basically the only time that epidemiology really worked, I think. And I talked about this Dr. Georgia Ede, who's great. Anyone can check out her website or my podcast with her. But it's like, this was obvious. There was it's like the one intervention, like this smoking, it was very clear. We could quantify it and we saw a gigantic correlation. But with everything else, we're relying on, like just self-reported data, just observations. None of this can show causation. So I think epidemiology is a huge problem, but then we don't have that many other options, because randomized controlled trials are pretty hard in nutrition. So,
and that's even the criticism that Verta Health gets, is that it's not random, it's an intensive intervention. And I was like, well, yeah, but it works.
Yeah,
and same for Jason Fung. You've never given any data. It's like, yeah, but I don't have to put these people on dialysis, so what's your problem?
I think at some point all these clinical evidence, I don't know what you call it, they're clinical anecdotes, they're beyond the anecdote, should add up to something.
Yeah.
Right, at some point when there's like thousands of people all over the world having the same awesome results, that should amount to something. So
yeah, mate, I've taken up a lot of your time already. Where do people find you, and where do people help to get this movie finished, man?
Yeah, we're on Indiegogo. We're trying to get the last money together needed for post-production. There's so many costs, and again, I'm matching all the money that people put up. So me and my partner are matching everything. So it takes about $150,000 to make a documentary, and we've raised $45,000 so far. So we need about $30,000 more from people, and then, I mean, we're putting it up ourselves to make this happen. So please support us. Indiegogo. Go to foodlies.org. You can listen to the Peak Human podcast, talking to a lot of these experts that are going to be in the film that we've talked about today. I've done podcasts with them, and just search Food Lies on social media and I'll be there.
Nice. And you're very friendly on Twitter. That's how we connected. So
come talk to me on Twitter. Ask me some questions, and I love to interact with people for the most part, unless you're a crazy vegan person.
And mate, your latest tweet you've got out there and shared your workout regime. How did that come about?
Oh yeah. A lot of people were asking me about my workout. So I've, like I was saying before, just simple 25-minute workout. They're only like 20 minutes actually, because I warm up for 5 minutes. But also people say you can't gain muscle on a ketogenic diet or whatever type of diet. I mean, I don't even call my diet keto. But I mean, I put on muscle in the last 5 months, so you can watch the video. It's on YouTube.
Yep, I put on 2 kgs of muscle in the last 3 months from
awesome
eating that way too, mate. So we'll wrap it up there, mate. What's something that you'd like to leave people with, or do you have any other asks of the audience or
No, no. I mean, just spread the word. But I guess I'll go out on eat densely, move intensely.
yeah, awesome,
That's
man.
all you need to know in life, really.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Brian. This was wicked to have you on board. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.